All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Douglas Show. I know you're expecting to see George Carmi. He had a holdup, won't be able to make it today. Have no fear, Chris Russell is here, and we're going to chop it up about some football. Brewster, what's happening?
What's going on, Doug? How are you, man?
I'm doing good. It'd been nice if we were watching our Commanders in the playoffs, but there was a lot of good football to be watched this weekend. Were there any big surprises? Do you have big takeaways from the weekend?
Um, well, what I would say for me, not that I was surprised that Joe Barry's Green Bay defense hung in there and fought and left everything on the table and really should have had two picks and maybe a pick six. But was that how bad San Francisco was in so many phases? I mean, yes, they had the big scoring drive at the end, nice mix of run and pass. And Brock Purdy threw a couple of darts on that drive. But he wasn't very good much of the game, with the exception of the big throw to George Kittle early on. And that was just, hey, man coverage. George Kittle's a maniac. And this is why I always say, Doug, on the radio and on Twitter and whatever, that it's not about the system. You have to have players execute in the system. Not every player can execute what Kittle and Brock Purdy executed on Saturday night. That was a laser. And that was, kind of a difficult play to make at a top end level. So they had a couple of good moments, but I was shocked at how, I guess, sloppy San Francisco was in so many ways. I mean, of course, the rain didn't help. I get it. But not running Christian McCaffrey more. Their clock management by Kyle Shanahan at the end of the first half, bad. Their defense wasn't great at times. It wasn't bad at times, but it wasn't great at times. If Jordan Love and the Packers executed a little bit better inside the red zone once, instead of like three missed opportunities in the first half in which they convert field goals, and you give San Francisco credit, but if they would have converted one of those, we could be talking about Green Bay in the NFC Championship game. So that kind of surprised me, even though San Francisco won. Wasn't surprised by Baltimore, wasn't surprised by Detroit. And, quite honestly, I picked Kansas City straight up to win in Buffalo. So I can't say I was surprised by that, especially with Buffalo's injuries on defense. But I know a lot of people were surprised by that, because of the various nature of the game script. Kansas City first road playoff game in the Mahomes era,
Which is
all that,
crazy.
their offense not great, all that stuff. So
Yeah, I agree with you. It's funny you mentioned about players being needed just as much as the scheme. You could see that with Buffalo. They were down to the fourth or fifth string linebacker there,
mhm.
and they had no choice.
Yep.
I think the most interesting thing, to your point, you were talking about that San Francisco game. There's a lot of familiarity there between the coordinators,
hmm
and it felt like Kyle Shanahan got out coached for the first time in what feels like a long time, because that really felt like it was on Kyle.
Especially without, like if you're kind of honing in not only the game clock management thing at the end of the first half, which was a
Right.
disaster. But and that led to a blocked field goal, and maybe they wouldn't have scored on that anyway. But they wasted way too much time there, Doug. I was shocked by that. But if you're talking about like maybe passing too much in the rain, a cold rain, no Debo Samuel. I mean, like to me, like Christian McCaffrey had 12 targets as a pass catcher, right?
Right.
7 catches and had like 31 yards, which tells you kind of how ineffective even the extension to the run game was, right? So many people say, well, who needs to run the ball when you can just throw short passes? They're just an extension of the run game. It's got to be effective too. And it wasn't that effective, quite honestly. It averaged, 4 yards a pop, 4.3 a pop, or whatever it was. It wasn't like the effective screen game or the short passing game when they were screen or pass or short pass heavy, meaning San Francisco. And when you don't have Debo, and when your offensive line is quite honestly, not great outside of Big Trent. Like, I don't know what Kyle was thinking. I was disappointed by what I got out of Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers on Saturday night. And think about it, right? If you know, if who's the kicker? Anders Carlson, is that his name
For the
for Green
Packers.
Bay? Yeah. I mean, he misses a 41 yarder with 6:15 left to go. 41 yarder is about as
Jimmy as
you
they
know,
come.
ho hum and makeable as you can. Again, I understand rain, all this stuff. I got it all, but like I am stuck on this, and I'm not going to be able to shake it, Doug. That not only was Kyle outcoached by Matt LaFleur and Joe Barry, even though they won, but also that man, San Francisco's got to play it 10 times better in order to beat Detroit.
They're going to have a tough time beating
Yeah.
Detroit. I think you're exactly right. That team is they. You talk about teams that are built on speed. That's a track team they put together in Detroit, and
Yep.
I think it'll be the other takeaway I had from this weekend, Chris. That despite what we've been told in Washington for 4 years, linebacker play matters, and you could see it. I mean, I tweeted out, "Hey, for those that want Ben Johnson as your head coach, just don't forget, like, look at the offense, look at the players they have on offense there." The same thing could be said for that Baltimore defense. We'll get to
Mhm.
this in a minute. Mike McDonald currently is my favorite if we're talking about head coaches, but again, we don't have Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen lining up at linebacker either. To me, no matter what the league has been trying to say as far as shifting out of linebackers, you could tell the teams that had it. Same thing with San Francisco. That linebacker play is important, and we need them.
Well, it's a great point. Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner in San Francisco,
Yep.
Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith in Baltimore, as you mentioned. Even in Green Bay, Joe's got, I mean, now they play some hybrid guys, obviously.
Yeah.
So, but Devondre Campbell and Quay Walker and
Yeah.
even Preston Smith, whatever. So, I mean, you look and you also look what's Detroit. Well, Detroit's got some big time weaknesses on their defense, right? They addressed in the first round, 18 overall, Jack Campbell,
Yeah.
the
Campbell.
linebacker from Iowa. He's been pretty good, I would say, down the stretch here, but their defense is missing behind Aiden Hutchinson that explosive playmaking threat, whether it be a Mike linebacker, Luke Kuechly mold, whether it be a pass rushing edge linebacker to help Aiden Hutchinson on that linebacker level, which then puts more pressure on the secondary, which probably is why, as long as Debo plays and San Francisco isn't as bad as they were on Saturday night, why I lean towards San Francisco in that game. But to your overall point, you know, you're you're right. And it was the mystifying thing was after overdrafting Jamin Davis, how they basically completely ignored, except for a bunch of 9-to-5 ham and eggers,
Yeah.
the linebacker position with not only Ron, but Jack. And then Steve Russ was the linebacker position coach all along. And they just kind of, it's almost like when teams eschew the running game, right? Not only is it not right, it's wrong. And you see it game in, game out, week in, week out, all the time. And especially like San Francisco and Baltimore. And I know they do it differently. But other teams have said, "No, we don't need a fullback. We don't need to run the ball. We don't need a fullback." And yet, again, not to overuse Kyle Shanahan, by and large, he's been the number one offensive guy for 6 or 7 years now. What do? They use a damn good fullback. Where did that fullback come from? Baltimore.
Yeah, that's right. I had forgotten that. You're right about that, and that and running the ball is also an interesting concept to those of us here in Washington. Now that they brought in Monken for the Ravens, whose offense I'm familiar with from being a big time Georgia fan, it is to me when Lamar said after the game, "I've got the keys to the car." To me, that meant one, they're running an actual professional offense, and they're letting Lamar be a quarterback that exploits the use of his legs. I'm not sure there's many quarterbacks in the league I'm taking over Lamar right now. Maybe, obviously, I think I'd take Mahomes, and I think maybe Allen in Buffalo, but
I
I
wouldn't
don't
take.
think so.
Yeah, I
Right?
wouldn't take Josh Allen over. I mean, I thought Josh Allen was really disappointing last
It
night.
wasn't good down the field, right?
I mean, he was 16 of 16 beyond the line of scrimmage, 10 of 21 north of the line of scrimmage. Obviously, the big
The big
drop by
drop.
Diggs
Yep.
although that wasn't as easy as people are making it out. but you still got to come up with it. But I thought Josh Allen was very, very spotty. So I would not take Josh Allen before Lamar Jackson. And if you would have asked me this a year ago, I would have said I take Josh Allen over Lamar Jackson. Couple of things. Lamar Jackson, proved he could stay healthy, which
Yes.
I couldn't believe people were like not that worried about, like when people evaluated Lamar Jackson and they were mad that the Commanders and the Falcons and whatnot didn't go after him. Listen, man, he had missed 13 games over 2 years,
Mhm.
including 6 games in each year to end the regular season and 1 playoff game. Not to mention, he was still developing, still figuring out how to operate from the pocket. You know what I've seen? Doug, I'm sure you've seen the same thing, is there are plays, like I remember one specific play, and I was talking about this on the radio on Monday, where the snap was on the left hash, and he kind of went backwards to the right hash on kind of a diagonal, and Morgan Moses had his guy blocked completely like the sun, right? And Lamar had the entire half of the field he could have run for probably 35 yards because Morgan Moses had his guy locked down and the flow of the action was the other way, right? And Lamar drifted back to the other hash mark and fired an absolute seed over the middle. I think it was to Odell Beckham, but I could be wrong on that. But either way, it was a pass that I don't think Lamar Jackson in younger years in his career, even his MVP career, year in 2019,
Mhm.
would have made. And that to me, along with other plays, the Isaiah Likely touchdown, again, adjusting from the previous series to where Isaiah Likely said, throw me the ball, that type of thing. To me, that's something that I didn't see enough of out of Lamar Jackson in previous years. Now, whether that was Greg Roman or not, I can't say conclusively. I know fans blame Greg Roman.
Yeah.
I'm I I disagree with that. I'm not saying that Greg Roman wasn't at fault at times, but I think that was partially Lamar Jackson, quite honestly, not being
Mm.
that developed pocket passer and not staying in and staying home and being able to dissect and beat teams without using his legs necessarily.
You think it'll be Chiefs? Let's see. You like the Chiefs over the Ravens?
I like the Ravens. Yeah, I
Yeah.
like the Ravens early lean. I think they're going to get Mark Andrews back. And if you get Mark Andrews back, along with Isaiah Likely, along with Zay Flowers, Odell, uh, um, Rashad Bateman, Dalvin Cook now into the fold. I know he wasn't a big factor on Saturday, but maybe he'll be a bigger one. I like their offensive line. Obviously, what we saw to Mike McDonald, especially in the second half on Saturday, was pretty cool to watch. And if you're a Commanders fan and you think, hey, man, I'm not a big fan of defensive minded head coaches, but that Mike McDonald, man, he cranked up the band. Now, again, it helps to have, like you said, not only those great linebackers, and they were without one of their top corners, but it helps to have,
Sure.
Kyle Hamilton. It helps to have Justin Matabikwe. It helps to have Jadeveon Clowney and all of the different weapons that they have. He wouldn't be immediately inheriting that, but you'd like to think that if he were to come here as a head coach, right after this run with the Ravens, wherever it winds up, you'd like to think that obviously there would be a heavy lean towards defense, maybe after the number 2 overall pick. We can discuss that, obviously, all that as we go along. But the point being is, first, he would be a first time head coach. He's young, which everybody loves, and he's aggressive. But I think he's smartly aggressive, right? And if you have the pieces that Baltimore has, it allows you to do a lot of different things that not everybody can do and get away with, especially against good quarterbacks like CJ Stroud and Houston. And I would just say this, you watch these games and you come away impressed by certain guys and you come away with some questions about other guys. I would say this, Mike McDonald, I have less questions about right now than I certainly did earlier this year. And I might have less questions about him than I do about Bobby Slowick or even Ben Johnson still.
Yeah, to me, for McDonald at least, and I guess people have the same reservations about Johnson simply because he doesn't necessarily come from a pedigreed coaching tree, if you will. But to me, it's more about like what will the staffs look like. I guess for Johnston, we've heard now maybe he brings the O-line coach with him, which I like the idea of that.
Like
Maybe
Hank
with
Fraley.
McDonald, that's part of the problem is like what would the staff look like? But we do the film breakdowns every Tuesday with George, and Mark Bullock joins us. And we looked at Mike McDonald last week, and the stuff that they do, that he's doing with simulated pressures and everything,
Mhm.
it's really forward thinking. They do a triangle safety rotation that I really haven't kind of seen. It's hard to know where they're
Yep.
going.
With Geno Stone, yeah. And
Yeah, so I think again, I said this earlier, and I think he's the leader in the clubhouse for me personally. Before we get to some of the coach stuff, because I do want to know what your opinions are, we're getting ready to switch. There's a new owner in the building, there's a new GM in the building, all exciting stuff. I was hoping maybe you'd peel the curtain back just a little bit. I'm curious, I'm sure others will be. You set up relationships in the building to get information. That's part of the information building. How is that affected? How does that change? How many people that do PR type stuff stay in the building? Do you know where I'm getting with this? Like, what does that change look like for reporters and local inside guys?
Well, so, I should point out that I don't do as much of that
I
anywhere
know.
near
Yeah.
as much of that as I used to, and that's by choice and by role. So let me start there. But I would say this, like right now, the PR staff is still the same. So, if you're looking to confirm stories or whatever that are already out there by the national guys who get most of the stories, right? You still have those people that are in the building every day who you've established, hopefully a good working relationship with, so on and so forth. That's why, like when I don't know, Ian Rappaport reports, Adam Peters is getting the job, or Adam Schefter report, immediately, like that's kind of like what you do to confirm that yes, that story is correct. Now that doesn't mean that they're, telling the local people that first. Again, there's too much to me, and there always has been this. Let's get it out to the national guys first,
Right.
as opposed to the local people. But that's maybe me, maybe being frustrated by that. Maybe that's like that everywhere. I don't know. But that's just my gut. I would say this: it's really hard with a new ownership group, with now a new general manager, and obviously soon to be a new coaching staff, to get the kind of information that you need, especially in this first off season when you're not working together every day. Like when the off season program starts and then training camp starts, the new coaching staff, the scouts, the Adam Peters, they're seeing John Keim every day, Nikki Javala every day, Ben Standig every day. They won't see me every day, which is probably a good thing for them, but maybe they'll see me every day at training camp and they'll be like, oh yeah, okay, I know, I heard him on the radio, whatever. So you start to build that trust, that relationship, but it takes time to build that. So
Yeah.
what I would say is, don't expect the locals to break a ton of stories, if not many stories, just because all of these relationships are new with all of these people. We've never had a situation where you had ownership new, a GM new, and a head coach new, and a new coaching staff, with probably very, very, very few old faces all at the same time. Not to mention the whole building, really, Doug, has changed over the last couple of years, right? There's just almost nobody left,
Yeah.
from when I was working in that building on an everyday basis and traveling with them and staying with them in the hotel. And, now that's been a number of years, but I mean, a lot of those people stayed around until Ron and Jason got there. Almost none, if none of those people are still here.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And that's why I wanted to know, because I think it's not talked about enough for the people that's job it is to cover the team,
Yeah.
because it's all relationship based.
Yeah. And that's why I don't spend a lot of time, quite honestly, worrying
I
about,
knew you didn't, but I knew that
stuff.
I knew your
Yeah.
background and
Right.
experience should at
Right.
least lend itself to be, and I
Right.
think it did. I think it's interesting.
Here's what I'll say. We all depend on, in lieu of, while you're trying to build these relationships, the relationships with these new people, right? We all depend on couple of things that not that it never changes, but agents are agents, right? So agents are a
Yeah.
source of information for a lot of reporters. And then the other thing that, I know I rely on is talking to people around the league. I know coaches
Yeah.
on every staff that know people, that know what's going on. I know former general managers in the league that know stuff, that hear stuff, that get told stuff, that talk to other people. Now you have to be judicious about what you use and what you use for background and what you use and what you believe in, and hopefully nobody's lining you up and trying to use you for your platform. But like, for instance, on the final day of the regular season, I was told by somebody in Dallas, that Dan Quinn was very eagerly looking forward to interviewing for the Commander's job. He wants this job. And I was told he interviewed, I think, in person on Sunday, I believe it was. Maybe it was Saturday. And, like, it went really, really, really well. And a lot of people are like, oh, Dan Quinn, you can't, blah, 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 all this stuff, all this nonsense. Because of what happened to the Cowboys in the playoffs, B, because he's a retread, and B, C, because he's a defensive coach, and how dare we, and all that nonsense. But, that's what, just to kind of put a bow on this, a lot of the information, I would say, over the next couple of months that are being generated by the local reporters and the local media are going to come from outside sources because, again, all of these relationships are new.
It it doesn't feel like reality that Washington is the place that everybody wants to be. I don't know that we've had that. I tweeted that out earlier. 40 years, I'm thinking. I don't remember us ever being the belle of the ball that everybody is standing in line to be a part of. It's wild times, Chris.
Yeah, and I think it all started obviously with Josh in late July
Yeah.
of last year. And listen, make no mistake about it, it's not just Josh. I mean, Magic Johnson is a captivating figure. Everyone knows the name Magic Johnson. And now when you add in, just fast forwarding, Bob Myers, right? A lot of people know that. Maybe they don't know him as well as Steve Kerr and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, but a lot of people know the name Bob Myers, big time NBA executive, young, and who knows, would they have gotten Adam Peters? Would Adam Peters had made the Washington Commanders the number one choice, and would he have been theirs if Bob Myers wasn't working behind the scenes, which I strongly believe he was, even before it was announced the day after the season, and then certainly when it was announced? Like, would that have happened? I don't know. I can't say for sure it wouldn't have, but I don't know if it would have happened. So it is the dawning of a new era, obviously. It is, I said this the day Adam Peters was, it was reported, obviously, that he was coming here. To me, that was way more of an important hire than the head coach, way more important than the offensive coordinator and all that nonsense. I'm just not a big guy that believes in designing plays on a chalkboard being the most important thing. Adam Peters was brought here as we all know, the first legitimate full-time football executive who's not going to be a head coach in 30 years, since Charlie Casserly in 1999, or I guess not 30 years, 24 years, 25 years, whatever it is. And to me, player procurement, player evaluation, player assessment is the most important thing that this organization has been missing at a high quality level for 25 years. Adam Peters is going to make some mistakes. You look at San Francisco's draft history, everyone knows Trey Lance. They made a couple of mistakes with Solomon Thomas and Reuben Foster in their very first draft, and they recovered because they hit triples and home runs in the middle rounds. To me, what you do, sorry, this is a long answer. Remember in Ron's first year with Kyle Smith at his side, they got really good value in free agents in J.D. McKissick and Ronald Darby
Logan Thomas
and
that year.
and Logan Thomas and guys like that, right? Wes Schweitzer even. When Kyle Smith left, falling out between him and Rivera, whatever the whole deal was there, it was never the same. They all, remember they drafted Cam Curl and James Smith Williams in the seventh round. The seventh round.
Okay.
They're still here now. Now they're free agents, but they're still here now. And we know Cam Curl is a bigger difference maker than James Smith Williams. But you get my point. Is they did all this when they had a real football executive in the building helping Ron make these very critical decisions. Now you have Adam Peters and whoever he decides to surround himself with, short term and long term. I just hope, Doug, that we get more of what we got in 2020 as opposed to what we got in 2021, 22, and 23.
Do you have a preference on the new head coach? Do you have a preference, offense or defense? Do you have a preference? We talked briefly about putting the staffs together. It feels like, as far if we're looking at that, Quinn and Raheem Morris probably are able to put together a better staff than the other two. Do you have a preference?
So, like for me, I mean, if I'm being totally honest, I what I would like more than anything, more than offense, defense, special teams, is a guy with experience. That's what I like. Now, I know that's not what everyone else wants. I understand the term retread. I hate it. It's
Sure.
awful. I fight against it. I will
Bill
not stop
Belichick was
fighting
a
against
retread.
it. Yeah. That being said, I'm open to hiring a first-time head coach, but what you don't know is, can Ben Johnson, can Bobby Slowick, can Mike McDonald, can they be quote unquote leader of men? And sometimes
Right.
I think that's overused, but Adam Peters said flat out, this building has pieces. They're missing leadership.
Yep.
They have told people privately they're looking for the best leader, the person that can galvanize the players and the building on an everyday basis and change whatever Ron did with the culture and all that gobbledygook into a championship culture, which was never going to happen under Ron. I'm sorry, it just wasn't going
Yep.
to happen. They need somebody to essentially, okay, watch my hands here. Take the, here, let me use my right hand. Take somebody by the grapefruits and squeeze them a little hard and squeeze until the pulp all comes out of them. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they
Right
need
there.
somebody that can make average guys good, good
Yes.
guys very good guys great. And they have not had that. So to me, that's what I'm really looking for, somebody with some fire and intensity, but somebody that's not treating people like Brian Dable is treating people
Right.
in New York. Okay.
Yep.
I don't want that. I want somebody with some fire and intensity, but a love and kind of like a passion and an understanding like, hey, we got to do better and we got to dig down deep, but we're not going to treat you like a piece of crap. That's, that's really important in this too, because you can get a hard ass and somebody who yells and curses all the time. That ain't necessarily good either. And by the way, I don't think that was Eric Bieniemy too. Like, for people that have that image that Eric Bieniemy, that's all he did. I'm not saying he didn't do some of that, but I think Eric Bieniemy is a different type of leader than a Brian Dable, if you will, in that, I think he's demanding and I think he's tough and I think he curses and all that. So I know he curses. I mean, I've seen it, but I think he's got a tough love about him. Whereas I don't know if a guy like Dable, just to use that as a prime example, has that in him. And I think that drove out Wink Martindale, and I think that's going to drive out some players in New York and so on and so forth. We'll see. So to me, that's what I'm more looking for, more than offense, defense, whatever. I would prefer somebody with head coaching experience. I covered Jay Gruden every day in 2014, his first year as a head coach. I'm not saying everybody's like Jay, but there is a lot. There is a lot to deal with that you are not prepared for necessarily as a first-time head coach. Now, the organization obviously is in much, much, much better standing now than it was back in 2014. So I'm not suggesting that a first-time head coach would face the same nonsense that Jay had to, but there was a lot that he wasn't prepared for. So to me, I lean again towards leader and experience. I understand the not novelty. I understand the desire to go young and offensive minded. I've just never been a one size fits all. I feel like you got to hire somebody who, again, reaches who makes you feel a little something that you weren't feeling, and maybe that's more guys than one. and you have to make a tough decision, and there's other factors involved. But I need my head coach to just make me feel something that I wasn't feeling, to make me want to go through that wall, that proverbial wall, and to make me want to work extra for the guy and for the staff. That's what I need my head coach to be.
We're months out, so I know it's early, but do you have a favorite for number two in the draft right now?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it would be, Drake May. Again, it depends on who goes number one, obviously, and by all accounts, it looks like it's going to be Caleb Williams. And I got to be honest with you, even though Caleb Williams, Washington D.C. product, so there would be some symmetry there. We know that hasn't worked out here.
That's right.
Okay, so that's number one in multiple ways. Number two, I got to be honest, Caleb Williams, I'm nervous about that. Not the football talent, but can he dissect an NFL defense consistently in the pocket? Number one, I do have that question. Is he too off platform friendly? Again, I mentioned earlier in this, Doug, and I don't know if you agree, Lamar Jackson needed to develop as a passer in the hashes, in the pocket, and I see that much more now, whether that's the offensive coordinator or whether I think what it is Lamar just getting better and working harder and doing more things and having more around him. Yes, but I need my quarterback to be very comfortable inside those hashes. I don't sense that all the time from Caleb Williams, and I have a lot more work to do. But this is just my feel, my sense, what I've seen, some people that I've talked to. Again, you love the off-platform stuff, but I don't want him to make a living off-platform, if
Right.
that makes sense.
Yes.
So that leads me to plus, look, the painting of the fingernails with the message towards Utah last year really, really, really angered me. I'm just gonna be
Mhm.
honest with you. I don't like that at all. I think Caleb Williams, whether it's fair or unfair, there's always going to be some sort of story, some sort of comment, some sort of drama. Like we see what's going on in Dallas right now, right? With Dak Prescott's family, with CD Lamb's mom, with Micah Parsons doing. I don't want any of that nonsense. As it's impossible to ignore it all and to eliminate it all, but I don't want a lot of that, and that's what I sense you're going to get with Caleb Williams. That's my sense. I don't know that. To me, Drake May, even though I was disappointed by his performance in several games this year, not only the Virginia game, which everybody talks about, but the last two at Clemson, at NC State, I did not think he was great. And again, it's early. Everything that I've seen of him, I mean, look, he's got size, he's got the prototypical pocket skills, he's got some mobility, and he's got a rocket for an arm. And to me, I don't know of any drama that comes with Drake May. So I'd probably lean towards him. I still want to look a lot more at Jaden Daniels because I'm enamored, obviously, with his athleticism, but also his deep touch and his deep ball accuracy, which, again, we see a lot of times where quarterbacks have arms and they can unleash the hose, but they're not accurate with it.
Yep.
Jaden Daniels, yes, he may have had guys running wide open and free, and he may have had really good receivers. All of that is true. But, Doug, I don't know if you agree with this sentiment. It seemed like a lot of times his ball placement, even when guys were running free, was right on.
Yeah, it was interesting. I actually mentioned this earlier. I was having a conversation with somebody, and they had said, "Well, I went back and watched the Jaden Daniels film from Alabama, and it was pretty good." He said, "But I also got stuck watching the receivers because man, they're so good." And I was thinking to myself, Chris, this is going to be one of those weird deals, right, where Jaden Daniels is going to get knocked for having two good of teammates, right? Like that's what it is because that's what they'll say. They'll say, "Well, who was Drake May throwing to?" And Jaden Daniels has got at least two first round wide receivers this year going, not to mention the offensive line they had. But to your point, the quarterback's got to get them the ball. I mean,
Right.
if you're not doing that, you're not certainly not winning Heisman's, and those receivers probably aren't going in the first round. But I think it's odd because he is going to get knocked. That's one of the things I promise you're going to hear throughout this cycle, and
Absolutely.
it is yeah, but and the yeah, but sucks.
And his frame, and the fact that,
That-
again, what makes him explosive and super dangerous is his scrambling and running ability, right? Which is
Yep.
all, again, good traits, but also worrisome traits to a lot of NFL people because, again, it's what you do mostly, not all the time, but mostly within the confines of the hashes or the pocket, right?
Yep.
So to me, and again, this is where I have to talk to more people and I have to do way more film study for just my own sake than I feel. But like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, maybe it was 2.5 weeks ago, I said, well, like my initial lean is I like Jaden Daniels more than Drake May and more than Caleb Williams. And everybody, a lot of people told me I was right. And a lot of people told me I was insane.
Yep.
And I probably am more insane than I'm right. But I would say there's blemishes, of course, on every prospect.
Mhm.
And it really, again, depends on what you're looking for. And my guess is, again, this is just my guess, with Adam Peters, like if you look at what San Francisco and even what they drafted in Denver when he was there, and of course his time with Belichick and the Patriots, the things that jump out to me in terms of like trends are almost all of those quarterbacks that he has been associated with, whether he deserves this credit for this or not, are not stationary, but they are more throw first, run
Yeah.
second type quarterbacks. If we look at Purdy, if we look at even Sam Darnold, okay, whatever. If we look at Jimmy Garoppolo, who again had some mobility but was throw first, run second. If we look at what happened in Denver, where they took tall, big, physical quarterbacks that didn't work out, like Brock Osweiler and Paxton Lynch, but maybe that was more John Elway with the big and tall and the whatever.
Yeah.
But those guys weren't run first. So does that eliminate a guy like Jaden Daniels? Does that necessarily knock down an off-platform specialist like Caleb Williams at 6'1", 6'1", maybe and a half, whatever?
Yeah.
I don't know, Doug. I mean, but if we're looking to read the tea leaves, to me, the more I think about it, the guy that seems to fit the profile of what Adam Peters has been around the most is Drake May. And he also seems like the most likely guy to be available compared to, say, Caleb Williams, not compared to Jaden Daniels, but, compared to Caleb Williams, if you'd had to lean one way or the other, most people, I'm sure, are going to be leaning towards Caleb Williams at number one to Chicago, right? Certainly all the big
Yes.
mocks are going to do that. And they already are doing that. Jeremiah and, Pro Football Focus and so on and so forth. Now, Shane Waldron coming in as their offensive coordinator, that kind of is unofficial as of,
This
we're
morning I
recording
saw it.
this.
Mhm.
I don't know how much that changes things. I mean, obviously, he's been around, Geno Smith the last couple of years, and Geno certainly has some mobility, but he's again a pocket first guy. So I don't know exactly where they go from here. But if I had to guess on January 22nd, and I'm not going out on a limb,
Right.
if I had to guess, I would say Drake May, and you hope like hell that he's something close to what Justin Herbert has been.
Yeah, I've said for a while now, it feels like if anybody can make a random jump up to first this year, it would be Daniels. He makes me nervous just a little bit, Chris, because I think he runs more like Robert and less like Lamar. Like
Yeah.
Lamar, and that's not a knock on him. It's not a knock on Robert. I said that the other day, and someone was like, "Oh, not Robert." Well, Robert was a hell of a runner, but he had track speed. And he ran up north and south. Lamar's got the wiggle to get left and right, and I think Jaden's got some of that, but I don't know. I've got to look some more too. But his running style, and I think he's another one of these guys that takes hits when not necessary. That's what makes me a little uncomfortable
I
about
think
him.
that's a really astute point. I mean, like when you watch Lamar, it's not all runs to the outside and along the sideline, right? Where there's more room, right, and less
Yep.
traffic. Lamar, again, we talk about throwing in the hashes inside the box and inside the pocket. Lamar, a lot of his human joystick runs has been, like you said,
Yep.
vision to see and absorb and not absorb and whatever. Yes, sliding is a part of that. All of that stuff. the early stuff that I've seen on Jaden Daniels, and again, I don't watch LSU every week, so I don't want to pretend like, and I'm not a scout, I'm not a coach, I'm nothing more than just a dum dum that's been doing football, on the radio and in print, and I've been around a lot of coaches and whatever for 28 years. When I see Jaden Daniels, I think more outside perimeter run type stuff, meaning scrambling and running away from people. And I do wonder if sometimes that can get you in trouble because you're trying to get to the outside and you're trying to make the big play where there's less traffic. And then you don't see somebody coming from the side or on the
Right.
diagonal, one. And two, when you're trying to get wide, you get strung out and you get battered around as you're trying to get wide, as opposed to and just sliding and not taking the big hit and maybe picking up 5 or 6 instead of 10 or 11 or 12 or 15.
Last one. I'm just curious. It's also way too early to know, but what do you think that they'll do with Cam Curl? Will he be back? I think the number looks like it's around 15 million a year.
So I've struggled with this one as well. I mean, obviously we don't know who the defensive coordinator is. We don't know the scheme, all that. So some of that will be determined by that. For me, the look, the problem is Kendall Fuller is a free agent as well, right?
Yes.
So you have to kind of decide, okay, probably between the two, which one of the two would I like to bring back? Maybe there's a chance you could bring both back, but probably one of the two between the two. And Kendall Fuller is clearly at a more premium position and better in pure coverage. And Cam Curl is more versatile and younger. And I think I think you can use him in different ways than maybe Kendall would be at this point in his career. Remember, the commander staff, now, again, not a great staff, obviously, they did not want to use him in the slot, which is what he was known for when he was first in the NFL and when he was first here, right? So is Kendall as flexible as Cam Curl probably is? Now, I don't think it's a good idea to have Cam Curl in single high, deep center field safety coverage or anything like that. So when I say flexible, I don't mean that. Can he get away with it from time to time? Sure. But that's not his forte. That's not his strength. Because he's younger and because he's a little bit more flexible and because I don't know the scheme and because I do worry a little bit about Kendall Fuller getting a little bit longer in the tooth, I would probably lean towards bringing Cam if I'm choosing between the two. And again, I do believe ultimately, I can't rule it out. I do believe ultimately, even though they've got all this cap room, they're not going to be able to bring back both, because you got to remember, with the cap room, you still have, Curtis Samuel to figure out, who was arguably their best receiver. Antonio Gibson, who, I mean, listen, I'm not as high on Antonio Gibson as others are, but he's still a valuable piece. And don't forget, this is a big one. Sam Cosmi is now eligible for a contract extension, and he does not have a fifth-year option.
That's right.
He's got to get a contract.
Yeah.
And he stayed healthy for all 17 games this year, which was a big problem in his first couple of years. To me, Sam Cosmi's got to get a contract extension now, Doug. Not maybe you could wait middle of the year, training camp, whatever, but I think he's got to get a contract like earlier than later to lock him up, because he's the only guy right now that you can say clearly we're going to build around this offensive line with him. Even though right guard is not premier, it's paid as a more premier position than it used to. Sam Cosmi is going to cost, probably $15, $16 million a year, quite honestly, and maybe more than that. And you got to pay it. So while we keep talking about free agents and who they're going to bring in and all of that's great conversation, to me, I got all these questions. Again, the Curl Fuller one, and maybe people think differently. I don't know. I haven't talked to enough people or paid enough attention to who people would want out of those two. I would guess Cam Curl. But then the other one again is, you got to determine what you're going to do with with Samuel and Gibson. I think most people would probably lean towards letting Samuel go and maybe keeping Gibson. I don't know. But Cosme is going to be an interesting one because do you get that done so that it's taken care of and so that the market doesn't continue to explode?
That's right.
And then the cost goes up as the market continues to explode.
Chris, that Cosby point is a great one. I hadn't even thought about it like that. Of the other two, I think I'd keep. I would bring back Samuel. I thought he was fantastic, and he does. I don't care what offensive coordinator comes in, head coach, whatever. You want a guy like that. The other one they'll have to worry about is Charles Leno. I think again, if we're talking about $14 million per year, to your point, it'll be interesting between Curl, not only just Curl and Fuller, but you've also got another 14 type year in Leno. And if you let Leno go out, I'm not sure who's playing left tackle. So
yeah, and so Leno's got what, one more year?
yeah, I think it's one at 14 and then maybe an option after that.
Is it that high? I didn't realize it was that high. Ugh,
I think it's close.
That's yikes for me. I mean, even though he was really dependable up until later in the season, that's a tough one for me, to swallow. I'm gonna have to do a little bit more of a look, on that. But to me, again, the Cosme one, getting that done before free agency, maybe before that price continue. And I don't know the other guards that are on the, but remember, it's not just right guards. Although people will just say, oh, right guard. But if a left guard gets paid, I mean, that, again, agents will blow the market out for left guard or right guard, even if you're a right guard. And we know he's a right guard and not a left guard, at least for right now. And I don't know why you would change, move him from that spot. My point is get it done and get it taken care of before you get into a Brandon Sheriff situation, before you get into a situation where, remember a couple of years ago when Kansas City was so desperate for offensive line help after the Super Bowl loss to the Bucs, they went out and they signed Joe Thuney from New England, and they blew out the market like $68 million or whatever. And everybody's like, oh yeah, he's a nice player, but what are we doing here? Yeah. Well, that happens. Andrew Norwell, former commander, right, who was terrible. Way back when he left Carolina to go to Jacksonville, he signed like a $65 million. But what are we doing here? Like what? I mean, the market explodes really fast. If you don't take care of guys with extensions, and not every player wants an extension, so that is a factor here as well. But I guess the overall point for me is if you're, free agents are different than a guy like Sam Cosme. I think if you put a fair offer, 15, 16-ish million dollars in front of Cosme, I think he would sign it.
Yeah.
If you're Curtis Samuel, if you're Kendall Fuller, and even if you're Cam Curl, they're going to free agency.
Yeah.
That's not the same situation, number one.
Right.
And number two, I don't even know in free agency or right around free agency if you offer each one of those just say $15 million a year, and obviously the numbers can be moved around. If you just said, here, $15 million, 3 years for Kendall Fuller, $15 million per year, 4 years for Cam Curl because he's a little younger, $15 million, 3 years for Curtis Samuel, I think all three of those guys initially say no and test the market.
Right. Yep. Yeah. You've made me more concerned than ever. They got to sign Sam Cosme because they got nothing else then.
Yeah.
Chris, appreciate it. I know that George wanted to be here, so maybe we can try a couple weeks and do this again.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Doug.
All right, buddy. Enjoy your party. Thanks.
Will do.